So good evening. Thinking about thinking about thinking. Well, here in Christiania, you might think about people reflecting about their own thought processes, in a very relaxed way with a cocktail. But tonight I would like to focus more on thinking about other people thinking about, again, other people thinking. So let me give an example. So I think that Jay thinks that the Danish science journalists think that science and cocktails mix very well together. And in fact I have reason to think so, because on the internet I've seen this picture where you see Jay with a genius prize that he got from the Danish science journalists exactly for having this beautiful initiative of science and cocktails. So they definitely think that they go well together. Well, let's see tonight. So I've never been at such a very strange and beautiful, wonderful place with so many people. So what is theory of mind exactly? Theory of mind is what you do when you think about other people's thinking. And this, something is going wrong here. Let me try to get back. It's back? Okay. So, such thinking about thinking is called theory of mind. And how it is defined in general is as follows. It is the ability to reason about mental states of other people, or sometimes other animals. And you may think about their beliefs, about their knowledge, about their intentions, about their plans. And people usually use that to understand other people, so to understand their behavior, but also maybe sometimes to predict their future behavior. And if you have children, you know that people also use theory of mind to manipulate other people's behavior. And what is very special about people is that we can also use it recursively. So we can use higher order theory of mind. Well, this sounds a little bit abstract, maybe. So let's give an example in which we can introduce the different orders of theory of mind. So suppose you know a person called Chris, and Chris has about your own age, and Chris is also single, just like you, and at a certain moment on the 14th of February, you receive this beautiful card here. A beautiful Valentine card with nice hearts on it. You really like the card. And also, it's an anonymous card, but you recognize the handwriting. That must be Chris. So, zero order reasoning is the fact that Chris was the one who sent you the anonymous Valentine's card. So it's zero order because we are not talking about mental states yet. It's just the facts in the world. Well, I'm reasoning now about you, and I'm now doing first order theory of mind when I say that, well, you know that Chris was in fact the one who sent you the card. You know that P, so where P is the abbreviation for the fact that Chris in fact sent you the card. But you can also think about something second order, namely the question, does Chris know that you know that it was Chris who sent you the card? And that's also a very interesting question. And what you will do in future may really depend crucially on whether Chris knew or not. So those are the different orders of theory of mind, and it helps that you can just count the number of times that mental stage verbs appear, like know that you know, that's second order. Well, children, up to a point, they cannot do even first order theory of mind. So for children, they usually think, for example, that their mother or their father knows everything. And especially that their mother or father knows exactly the same things that a child knows himself. And if you play hide and seek with a toddler, you will see that they are not yet able to reason about other people's mental states. So let's just see a little movie here. And there will be also some sound. So apparently, these children, they think that as soon as they don't see the other person, then that other person will also not know where they are. As you can see here, so she hides in such a way that she cannot see the other boy. And it's exactly the same in the second picture. So he thinks that if he just has a curtain in front of him and cannot see the girl, then she will not find him. And here it's a little bit better. He's hiding behind the curtain, you can still see his feet, but he cannot see the other one, so he thinks that he is in a good place. So, little children of up to about 3-4 years, they really cannot reason very well about other people's mental states. At around the age of 4, they make a big jump. They can suddenly realize that their mother may not know something which they know. And then, when they are between 6 and 7 years, they again make a big jump in theory of mind. And in order to illustrate this, I will do with you an experiment that we usually do with 5, 6, 7-year-old children. And to do that, I would like to ask Thomas Boelander and Nina Gielasinchuk to the front. Thank you very much. So, Thomas and Nina are children, as you can see. And in fact, they are my children. They are a little bit different of size, but definitely they are my children. And I give Thomas a piece of chocolate. There you go. It's because you were so nice, and that's why you get a piece of chocolate. So Thomas puts his piece of chocolate, a nice chocolate frog, under the blue bowl, as you have seen, and then he disappears. So apparently Nina doesn't like it so much that she didn't get chocolate, so while Thomas is away, she hides the piece of chocolate not under the blue bowl, but under the yellow bowl. And then Nina leaves. Maybe you saw something there, but Nina definitely didn't see anything. So, while they are both away and cannot see anything, I also meddle in their affairs and I put the chocolate not under the yellow bowl, not under the blue bowl, but under the red bowl right here. So that's where the chocolate is. And I say, Thomas and Nina, where are you?
You're right here.
Yeah. So would you like some chocolate, Thomas?
Yeah, that would be great.
So, where would Nina think that Thomas would look for the chocolate? And that's a question I ask to you, and I also ask to these 5, 6, 7-year-old children. So my question is, where does Nina think that Thomas will look for the chocolate? So,
blue one. Red one.
I hear blue, I hear yellow. Well, let's see. So the question is, where does Nina think that Thomas will look for the chocolate?
Blue.
I think blue. That sounds good. So I think apparently there are no 4-year-old children here, especially no 3-year-old children. Because if you were 3-year-old, you would say red, because that's exactly where the chocolate really is. And the 3-year-old cannot distinguish the reality that they know from the thoughts of other people. So if you were between 4 and 6 years old, you would say the yellow bowl, because you would be able to reason about Thomas's belief where the chocolate is. And he saw, in fact, that the chocolate was in the yellow bowl. And if you are 7-year-old, you know that Nina had a false belief about Thomas's belief. So you know that Nina didn't see him peeping from behind the curtain, so she doesn't know that he saw that it was at that moment in the yellow one. So she will think that he still thinks it's in the blue one where he put it himself. So all of you were completely right, and you have passed the exam for being 6 years or above. And thank you very much. So theory of mind keeps developing during childhood. And for example, when children are around 10 years old, they can also apply second-order theory of mind, for example, in maintaining a lie. So if you have lied to somebody, you really have to keep straight what the other person knows about the situation, and what they think about what you know. And also they understand the concept of promises. And it keeps developing even a little bit into adolescence. And you can see here that these two boys have very good second-order theory of mind. So the two boys have a quarrel, and the mother of one of the boys says, "Just talk to the guy." Okay, okay. And the only thing that Jeremy says is, "Dude." But he knows that the other one will know what he means. He knows that the other one will know that he means, really, "I'm sorry I got mad at you for trading my guitar for a tattoo. I was wrong and I apologize." And the other one also has perfect second-order theory of mind. He correctly thinks that if I say "dude," then Jeremy will know that I say "accept it. I didn't mean any disrespect. I'm glad that you are my friend." So they have perfect second-order theory of mind. So why is it so useful in daily life to have higher-order theory of mind? It is pretty hard to apply, but in our research in artificial intelligence, we used software agents of several orders of theory of mind: zero order, first order, second order, and even higher order. And my PhD student Harmen de Weert in artificial intelligence, he did a lot of situations where these agents play together. And in competitive situations, it was clearly the case that second order software agents, they really outperformed the first order agents and the zero order agents. So in competitive situations, it is definitely better to use second order theory of mind. But the most interesting situations, I think, in the world in which you can use second-order theory of mind are negotiations. So you see a picture here from the climate negotiations in 2009, right here in Copenhagen. So Obama just arrived, and by his very zeffy second-order theory of mind, he could think about what the others would be thinking, for example, about what the USA wanted. And that really helped him in the negotiations. And also, in our experiments with software agents, it turned out that indeed the second-order agents, they do better for themselves, but they also take care, let's say, that the pie is expanded. So first they expand the pie, and then they take care that they themselves get a fair share of that pie. So that's really what negotiation is about, and for which you definitely need second-order theory of mind. So okay, some adults can do that, like Obama. Children of 4 years old cannot yet do that. And it's also known that chimpanzees cannot do it. So, for example, chimpanzees sometimes seem to do teamwork, like hunting for a little monkey, but they are not really interested in the well-being of the other members of their team. So if one of the chimpanzees leaves, they really don't care, they just let him go. Or once they have their prey, they start to fight with one another who gets the biggest piece of the meat. So they don't really use second-order theory of mind. And on the other hand, a string quartet, like the Danish string quartet here, they care very much about each other's well-being. And they really use second-order reasoning of a form like, we all want that we play this piece of Beethoven beautifully together, for example. That's second order. We want that we want. And that is what is called a joint or collective intention. So animals do not have second-order theory of mind, adult human beings do, but there is still a controversy whether animals have anything like first-order theory of mind. And for chimpanzees, it seems that they have some form of first-order theory of mind. What is more controversial at the moment, but very much in fashion, is to look at birds. And one of the questions that I put in the abstract for this talk was, who is smarter, your cat or the crow that it wants to hunt? Well, the question is clearly the crow is much smarter than your cat. I'm sorry for all your cat lovers, but crows are much smarter. And in fact, the whole family of corvids, the crow-like birds, they hide their food and they have a beautiful memory. So they can hide up to 300 different pieces of food in different places during the summer, and then they are able to find back all these 300 different places in winter. So they're very good at hiding and at memory, but they are also good at seeing where other birds have hidden their food and at stealing the food of these other birds. So you would think that theory of mind would really help the corvids to protect their own caches, to protect their own pieces of food that they have hidden. And that would really provide them with evolutionary advantages, because then they keep their own favorite foods. So there's one group in Cambridge that has studied this question a lot with different types of corvids. Here you see a scrub jay, a Californian scrub jay, and in most of the experiments they use ice cube trays like this, and the birds, they hide their favorite foods, which is worms. So that's really their favorite foods. They hide it in these ice cube trays, and then they do experiments. And the leader of the lab is Rineke Verbrugge. You see her over here with a Eurasian jay, and she has shown a lot of things about corvids, about what they can do. And what appeared, for example, already is that these scrub jays, they cache their worms in places where it is difficult to see them. So they hide while they are not being watched. Also, when they are being watched, they pick up their worms again and they re-hide it in a different place, as if they try to confuse the onlookers. And also, if they have been watched and the onlooker goes away, they re-hide their worms again. And finally, they re-hide the most from the riskiest places. So, I'm going to talk with you about one experiment of Rineke Verbrugge and her group, and about what we did with that experiment. And the experiment goes as follows. Here is a scrub jay. So it's in its own compartment, the place where it usually lives, and it gets 2 ice cube trays, right here. And these trays have a few compartments each, and they are given some worms to hide. And then there are 3 possible conditions in which they could be. So some scrub jays get an onlooker in the next cage, and that onlooker might be a dominant bird or just a bird that is similar to themselves. Or there might be no onlooker at all. So you have no onlooker, a normal submissive onlooker, let's say, and a dominant onlooker. And then, so they have hidden some worms, and a few hours later, the trays are given back to them, and they can recover their worms, and you can either eat them, or just check them whether they are still there, or they can re-hide them again in a different place. So the question that Rineke Verbrugge asked was, do these scrub jays care about the distance and the social status of the onlooker when they recover their worms in the second session? And the outcome was as follows. So after they have been watched by a dominant bird, so on the leftmost part, right here, you notice that they recached the most worms from the tray that was near to the onlooker, so from the most risky tray. And then when there had been a subordinate bird in the other compartment, they hide much less, and also much less when they were in private. So in this case, they re-hide a lot of the worms, and most from the riskiest ice cube tray. So there are 2 existing theories about this behavior. And one of the theories is the theory of mind theory, or the mind-reading theory, as some people call it. So Rineke Verbrugge said that, well, these birds must be thinking about what the onlooker bird knows. So they might think something like, the onlooker bird knows where the worm is, so I need to recache it again, in order that the bird doesn't know anymore where it is. And so it really assigns some knowledge to that other bird. And so that's a very cognitively complex hypothesis to assign theory of mind to such a bird. But there is also another existing theory, which is, proponents are Penn and Poginelli, and they call their paper about this on the lack of evidence that non-human animals possess anything remotely like theory of mind. So a very provocative title. And they say that the birds just learn from the past behavior. So what they say is that they learn from their experiences in the past. They think, well, this recaching, this re-hiding the bird, it seemed to work pretty well in the past. I got my worm back, so let me just recache again now. And there's nothing about the mental states or the knowledge of other birds in that hypothesis. So those are the 2 existing hypotheses, and it's still controversial which one is the truth. But the problem with this second hypothesis is that it's really hard to test. You cannot really falsify it, because it might have any possible rules about behavior in the past. So what we wanted to find is a computational model, so a computer model that would not use theory of mind, but that would have testable predictions. So we would be able to falsify this second theory or the first theory if they could be falsified. So, and that's what my PhD student Elske van der Vaart did. She made a model in a computational cognitive architecture, a kind of virtual bird, and that bird had a memory which was quite similar to normal birds. So we validated it using a number of experiments about bird memory. And about this hiding worms, it had a very simple decision model. So it, for example, it would find a worm, then it would ask, is the worm safe here? And it would decide whether it was stressed. So it could be stressed by having stolen worms or just by the presence of an onlooker. And if it would think that the worm was not safe there, it would recache the worm. And otherwise, if it was hungry enough, it would eat it, or if it was not hungry, it would just check it and leave it be. So that was the simple decision model. There was stress in it, and there was a very developed memory in it. And it turned out that our model, our virtual bird, it didn't use any theory of mind at all. So it was nothing about the knowledge of the other bird, but it exactly reproduced the data from the script case in Cambridge. So you can see it here. Here are the data on the left side of the real scriptures, and these are qualitatively quite the same. So also, just like the real scriptures, the virtual birds, they recache much more when they had a dominant onlooker, and also much more from the near trade or most risky trade. So that was almost the same, and we also validated in a similar way some of the other experiments of that group. And the explanation for the behavior was that, so why does such a virtual bird recache more after it has been watched? So the reason was that during this first session where it was caching the worms for the first time, there was an onlooker present, and the bird would be stressed by that. And by that stress, it would simply recache more of the worms. Well, maybe you know that if you are nervous or stressed, you do a lot of activity which is not maybe very necessary, and just by that stress, it was caching and recaching all its worms. And then a few hours later, when it got its ice cube trays with worms back, then when it would try to find the worm, it would simply have been confused by its own recaching in the previous session. So it would be stressed again, but only by its own previous stressful behavior. So it would be even more stressed, and it would start to recache even more. So that was our explanation, all about stress and memory, and nothing about theory of mind. So this model made quite a splash at that time, because it made very specific predictions. So it can be tested experimentally, and we said that if our model is correct, then also if after the birds have been watched, they are given some new worms, they should also recache more of those. And also, they should be, other forms of stress should also lead to them recaching. So those were our two predictions. And Michael Walter, the science journalist, he published a paper about controversy in science, where he put the predictions. And also Nicola Clayton says, well, I take up this challenge, we will do that in our lab. So she tested the second prediction, that other forms of stress should also lead to recaching a few years later. Again, with her own scriptures and with a new experiment, she tested our prediction. And we were, of course, very nervous. Also, Elske van der Vaart, my PhD student, was for 6 months in Cambridge, and she took care of the birds, and she was looking at the experiment, and well, what would come out? She falsified it. So our model was still not the right one. So the controversy about theory of mind in scriptures remained undecided. Okay, but then enter the raven, an even smarter bird. I will show you a little movie about how smart the raven actually is.
Deep in midwinter, a fisherman sets his line through a hole in the ice, leaving it unattended in the cold. But in the trees sits watching and realizes exactly what the stick and line are for. Reeling in the line with beak and foot, the raven steals the catch day after day. The fisherman can scarcely believe his eyes when he finally discovers the identity of the thief.
So in this case, the raven is definitely smarter than the human person. And then you could ask the question, does this raven maybe have first order theory of mind? So it seemed that he was really reasoning about when to catch this fish out of the hands of the fisherman. And he really did it at the right moment. And he also used tools in a very beautiful way, I think, using both of his paws. So do ravens have first order theory of mind? Well, Thomas Buckner is really the one to ask that. He has studied ravens for at least 15 years in Vienna, in the wild, and also in the laboratory. And he asked the question, suppose that a raven has watched other ravens through a peephole. Then can that raven transfer the knowledge that you can see somebody through a peephole to a new situation in which the raven himself is caching his food, and suppose that he can hear but not see another raven in the next room. So that was his scientific question. And he built an experiment around that. So here you see Thomas Buckner with one of his ravens. And his experiment went as follows. There were 3 different conditions. In the first condition, there was a raven which was being observed by a raven in the other room, and it could see the other raven looking. And it could hide its favorite pieces of food, which in the case of ravens is meat. And in the second condition, it could not see the other raven because there would be an opaque barrier in between the 2 rooms. So there would be a raven, but he couldn't see this raven. And then in the third version, there would be a peephole, and in fact in the next room there would not be a real bird, but it would have sounds from a real bird who used to be in the next room. And so in all these 3 cases, the ravens were allowed to cache and to recache pieces of meat. So let's see what happens. So the question then is, do ravens know when another raven could have seen them without actually seeing any real other raven? And it turned out that the answer was really yes. So the ravens in the observed condition, so who had been really seen by another raven, they act almost the same as the ravens who saw only that there was a peephole, while they had looked through a peephole at another bird before. So these ravens also must have known that somebody could have seen them and could know the locations of the pieces of meat. And their behavior in these cases, so they cache really less than otherwise than when they are not being observed at all. And also the number of times that they recache their pieces of meat are very similar in these 2 cases and different in the other case. So I think he showed really convincingly that at least these birds can reason about having been seen and another bird possibly knowing the location of the pieces of meat. So I think we are really a step farther now in seeing that ravens are really extremely smart and they have something like first order theory of mind. Okay, so with this I like to finish the story about ravens and come back to adults. So, ravens find it difficult, ravens sometimes can outsmart an adult, and indeed even adults find it sometimes difficult to apply second order theory of mind. Especially when you have to apply it in real life strategic situations. So I will just give an example of such a situation which we recently had in our lab. So we wanted to hire a new scientist, and we had 2 candidates. And my question to the candidates was, if you had $1 million, what scientific project would you do? And the first candidate said, a million, that's quite a lot. I've never had anything like a million. I don't know. And the second candidate, in the second talk, she just started dreaming up the most beautiful project. And of course, she was the one that we selected. So she really did her second order theory of mind, like they want to know whether I know how to think up about big new goals. So that's something difficult to do, but you can actually train people in it. And in order to train people, we designed a new game called Marble Drop, which was designed by my PhD student Ben Meijering. So the Marble Drop looks like this. I will slowly move you through the rules, and then we will also train you a little bit in zero, first, and second order theory of mind using this game, Marble Drop. So it's a turn-taking game between a participant, usually in our experiments, or it could be you in this case, and on the other hand, there would be a computer player. And you would be the orange player, and the computer player would be the blue player. So a white marble like this one would start to drop down. You see it over here. And you, the participant, the orange one, you would have control over the orange trapdoors. You could choose it to open the left one or the right one in your first turn. And then in the second turn, the computer would have control over the blue trapdoors, and it could choose to open either the left one or the right one. And in this way, the course of the white marble could be controlled. And then, if they get there, in the third place, you again get your turn to choose either left or right. But then what is your goal in the game? So you as an orange participant, you want the marble to drop into the bin where the leftmost marble is as dark orange as possible. I think it's a bit hard to see from the back, but this one is very light orange, then a little bit darker is this one, then that one is even darker, and this one is the darkest. So that's your goal as the participant. And the computer, on the other hand, he wants the marble to drop into the bin which has the darkest possible blue marble. And so the lightest blue marble is right here, then a little bit darker is right here, even darker is here, and the darkest is right there. So those are the goals of the game, and it's a turn-taking game, but we first trained the participants with a very easy one, a zero-order game. So suppose we said the marble will drop down, and it's your goal that the marble ends up in the bin, which has the darkest possible orange marble on the left. So which of the two would you open? Left or right?
Right.
Right. Okay, so let's see what happens. Yeah, right, indeed, it's dropped into the bin with the darkest possible orange marble. So that was not very difficult. So we gave them a few of these training sessions with first zero-order games, and then we said, well, let's make it a little bit more difficult. Let's do a first-order marble drop game. So we added a bin, and we added a set of trapdoors, and we said, okay, now you are playing against a computer player who is completely rational and who wants to go to a bin where the blue marble is as dark blue as possible. There is a turn-taking game. First you choose which of the orange trapdoors to open, and then the computer chooses which of the blue trapdoors to open. So which one do you open this time, left or right? Left. Okay, let's see what will happen. And indeed you choose left, because if you had chosen right, then the computer would have chosen for this one, which leaves you with a very bleak orange marble, so you wouldn't do that. Okay, then we trained them with a few of these first order sessions, and then we said, well, let's make it a little bit more difficult again. Suppose now that after the computer's turn, you will also get a turn if the computer allows you to go to the right. So what would you choose this time? Left or right? Now I hear some mixed answers.
Still left.
So I think I hear a little bit more right than left. Who thinks left? And who thinks right? So there are definitely more people who think right. So let's try what happens when you do right. So that then he chooses left, and that's really good for you. So indeed, right was the good choice here. So if you had chosen left here, you would have ended up with a little bit less dark orange marble. So that's what we did in our training sessions, and then we asked them to do some experimental sessions. And it turned out that the effect of this kind of step-by-step training was really good. So the proportion of correct decisions really went up from 65% to around 94%. While in the literature, with other people who use more abstract games, they usually only got up to around 65% at the end. So this stepwise training is really what helps people to get better. But people will seem never to be really perfect, and it's really hard to do second-order theory of mind in a kind of intuitive way. So to show that, we did a second experiment. And in that experiment, we had two different versions of the game. In one version, you were again the orange player. This time you wanted to get into the bin where there are as many orange diamonds as possible, so the 4 would be perfect for you down at the left there. And the computer player wants to get to the bin with as many blue diamonds as possible. And in this case, again, you could control the orange trapdoors and the computer could control the blue trapdoors. So in this case, where would you go, left or right?
Left.
Let's see what will happen. Yes, you go left, and he goes left, and you get your 4 marbles. So that was really a good idea. And then the second type of problem would be a little bit different. We wouldn't ask you to make your own choice, but to predict what the computer player had done. So we'd say, predict which one he would open. So if you predict what the computer player does here, would you say left or right? Right. Okay, let's see what will happen in fact. Open the right one. And the participant goes left, and that really gives the computer their 4 blue marbles. So that's perfect. But you notice maybe that in the second case you had to use second-order theory of mind. You had to reason from the participant, so he will think that I will open the left trapdoor. So he will think that I intend to go left. That's really second-order reasoning. While in the first type of game, you only had to do first-order reasoning. You had to think, okay, what will he do when I open my orange trapdoor? That's just first-order reasoning. And game theoretically, these two are really exactly the same problem. Maybe you noticed, but I just replaced all the blue ones by orange ones. And so these questions were really the same, and you had to make exactly the same comparisons between numbers of marbles. So if you do this officially game theoretically, you first say, okay, 3 is better than 1, and then you say, okay, 3 is better than 2, and then you say, okay, these 4 are better than 3, so I should go left. And you do exactly like the mirror image here with the same comparisons. So game theoretically, these are exactly the same, but still, it turns out that people find the second version, where you have to predict what the other one does, more difficult. And that appeared clearly from our experiment. So the grey one are the first order games where you have to make your own decision. And there they quickly went, in their 56 first order games, they quickly went to about 95% correct, or even more. While in the second order games, they started about 50% correct, and they went much slower, and they got up to 80%. While these were really the same comparisons they had to make. And similarly for their speed, so they went quicker and quicker for the first order one, and for the second order one they stayed behind. So these are logarithms, so they really stayed much more behind than you would think. So our conclusion from this is that even if they are game theoretically exactly as complex as one another, these two versions, still it remains really difficult for us to really put ourselves in some other person's or other computer's shoes. So we would have thought as experimenters, you simply think, okay, now I'm blue, now I make a decision. But that's apparently not what our participants did. And well, Of course, you know also from real life that it's difficult to put yourself in another person's perspective. Everybody who has ever had any relationship knows that this sometimes goes pretty wrong. But then logic can help. So logical people are very dry, very rational. They are very good at reasoning about other people. Maybe you know this joke about logicians. So actually at this very moment, there's the first ever scientific conference here in Christiania. And the conference is full of logicians. So you might meet a situation like this. 3 logicians come into the bar. And the bartender asks them, do all of you want a beer? And then the first one says, I don't know. Then the second one says, I don't know. Then the third one says, yes. So apparently, so of course you shouldn't generally say how jokes are in fact, but the first logician says, I don't know, and that must mean that the first logician himself does want a beer. Because if he wouldn't want a beer, he would say, no, we do not all want a beer because I don't want a beer. So from this, you can conclude that the first logician wants a beer. Then the second logician also says, I don't know. And then you do the same reasoning. If he would not want a beer, then he would have said, no, we do not all want a beer. So he also must want a beer. And the third one knows all of this because it's a logician. And he wants a beer, so he says yes. So that's how logicians reason. And logicians also have perfect higher order theory of mind. And I would like to show this to you and also at the same time to teach this to you. And I would like to ask Thomas and Nina to come to the front. So, hello Thomas, hello Nina.
Hello. Hello.
Hello?
So how are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
And you, Thomas?
Yeah, fine.
So would you like to ask me something?
Yeah, so we were wondering, what is your birthday?
When is my birthday? Well, I know that both of you are perfect logicians. That's why you organize this conference here. And so you can do perfect logical reasoning. And I also know that both of you always tell the truth, right? And that's commonly known now to everybody here. So I'm very glad about that. And so I think it's too boring to just tell my birthday. So what I will do instead, I will tell you just the month of my birthday. And I will tell you nothing else. Yeah? Okay, and on the other hand, I will tell you just the day in the month of my birthday. Not the month, just the day, and I will tell you nothing else. Yeah? Okay. So, let's see what I know at this moment. So, I will also tell you that my birthday is one of those 10 days. So it can be January 11 or January 12 or January 15. It can be February 13 or 14. It can be March 9 or 12. Or it can be April 9, 11 or 13. Those are all the 10 possibilities. So you know the month, you know the day. Both of you are perfect logicians. You know all that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so now the following dialogue takes place.
Thomas, I know you don't know Rineke's birthday.
Okay.
So,
Now I know Rineke's birthday.
Now I know it too.
really?
Yeah.
Whoa. So you must be perfect logicians. Now I can ask you, what's my birthday? And based on this dialogue, you should be able to do that. And based on the fact that they are both perfect logical reasoners and that they always tell the truth. So let's see how logic can help us solve this puzzle. Is there anybody who knows it already? Not even the dynamic epistemic logicians here. Okay, let's just sketch.
Give them 1 minute.
Yeah, I'll give you 1 minute.
You can discuss it. You can discuss it.
And I mean knows without looking on Google what is my birthday, or without having been at my birthday parties before. Yeah?
February 14th.
No, it's not. That's Valentine's Day, but it's not my birthday. So let's see how you can reason about this. So let's look at the situation just before the dialogue started. So Nina knew only the month, and Thomas knew only the day in the month. And then in this picture, I've drawn all the 10 possible birthdays, and for these ones, that are all in January, I put these red connections for Nina, because for Nina, based on her information, she cannot distinguish them. If she hears January, it might as well be 12 or 11 or 15. She cannot distinguish these ones. And similarly for February, if she hears February, it could be 13 or 14. She doesn't know the difference. And similarly for March, it could be 12 or 9. And similarly for April, it could be 9, 11 or 13. And then for Thomas knows only the day in the month. So if he hears 11, it could be either January or it could be April. He doesn't know the difference, right? And if it were February, it could be either 13 of February, or sorry, if you heard 13, it could be either February or April, and so on. So here are blue connections for Thomas because he cannot distinguish those two worlds. So that's the situation just before the dialogue starts. But now Nina said, and she's a perfect logician, she said, Thomas, I know that you do not know Rineke's birthday. And then I start to think about these pictures, and you can do as well, knowing the dialogue so far. And you can think, well, if it had been, for example, January 15 or February 14, then Thomas would have known. And Nina would also have known that Thomas would know. So if she now says, I know that you do not know, then it cannot be January and it cannot be February. Because in both those months there are possibilities that Thomas would have known. So we can take away the whole month of January and February. Those will not be my birthdays. So we have taken them out of the picture completely, and we are left with 5 possible days after just this first statement of Nina. But now Thomas also makes a statement. He says, now I do know Rineke's birthday. And if I look again at my picture, then I know that we cannot be in either of these two situations, because in these two situations, Thomas still would not have known my birthday. He cannot yet distinguish them from one another. So this is not what Thomas knew. He didn't get to hear the 9, and so we can take away both those worlds which have the 9 in it, because in those worlds he wouldn't yet have known it. So let's throw those worlds out. Okay, now we are left with just 3 worlds. And then we hear Nina's third and last statement, which is right at the bottom there. Now I know it too. And that means that we cannot be in April, because in April she would still have had 2 possibilities, April 11 and April 13. And she wouldn't have said, now I know it too. So my birthday must be the only one that is left after taking away these 2 yellow ones, which is March the 12th. And in fact, that is really my birthday. So Nina, can you tell me something about your reasoning during this puzzle? How come you could say Thomas already know that you don't know?
Well, I just reasoned exactly in that way. This is what I have in my head all the time.
So you are reasoning really impossible worlds, models, and...
Well, I just thought of what are the options that he has, given the ones that I know.
Okay, yeah.
There was not enough information.
Did you also have your model in mind, Thomas?
No, well, I know we rehearsed it, so I knew. I knew what to say. Oh, okay. This is not the right answer. No, okay, this is true, but it was not the right answer. So I got the number 12. So actually, I only had these two options. So it's either January 12th or March 12th. Yeah. And that I don't know, but then Nina says, I know that you don't know Rineke's birthday. And then I reason about these two possibilities. And then, well, the same as you say, if it had been January, then Nina would have to consider it possible that it could be January 15th. Yeah. And in that case, she would know that I would know, because the only 15th available among these dates is 15th. In that case, I would have known. Yeah. So therefore, I can exclude this one, and then I know this one.
Okay, so I would like to thank these two perfect logicians, and now all of you are also a bit more perfect at logic, just being trained by these two. Thank you very much. Well, the final question is, should you always do something with your second order beliefs? For example, should you always pronounce them? And let's turn back to this Valentine card. You got a beautiful card. And suppose now you discover that, in fact, Chris does know that you know that Chris was the one who sent you the card. And what should you do now? Well, suppose you are not interested in Chris at all. Then it would be a little bit rude to say, well, I know that you know that I know that you sent me the card. It wouldn't do. And if you are interested in Chris, well, what should you do? It's also a little bit maybe boring or not so subtle to say, okay, I know that you know that I know that you know that you sent me the card. I think that's not the best thing to do. But what is the best thing? I think the best place to discuss that is during cocktails. So let's move to the next part of today. Thank you very much.